Okay, so Parshas Mishpatim. There really are a lot. I mean, this parsha is packed, and there's a lot that we could talk about. What we are going to talk about, one of the mitzvahs, it's basically we just have a parsha full of mitzvahs. Ve'ela HaMishpatim, these are the statutes. After we had the giving of the Torah last week, so then this week we have Mishpatim, just a list of laws, of mitzvahs that we received and became responsible and honored to observe after we got the Torah on Har Sinai, which we talked about in last week's parsha. So, one of the mitzvahs in this week's parsha is Im Kesef Talveh, as Ami it says. The most common translation of the word im is if. Im Kesef Talveh, which means if you will loan money. Now, im doesn't only mean if, im can also mean when, and in this pasuk specifically it does mean when. And the idea that it's telling us is that if someone, im kesef talve es ami, means when you will loan, es ani imach, when you will loan money to the impoverished, to the needy from among your people. Which means that if someone comes to you requesting a loan to help them get on their feet, whatever it is, and you are in a position to be able to lend them the money they're requesting, there is actually an obligation to lend the money. Fine, that's that. Now, there is a medrash that says, the medrash quotes this pasuk. So there's a pasuk that says, Magid Dvarav LeYaakov Chukav Umishpatav LeYisroel. Now what this means is Magid Dvarav LeYaakov, he tells his words, his things, LeYaakov to Yaakov, Yaakov meaning the Jewish people, Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yaakov, Yaakov and Yisrael, same thing. Chukav, his statutes, Umishpatav, and his laws, LeYisrael, to the Jewish people. So there's a medrash that says, that points out in each of these, each time we have a reference to what Hashem is telling us, it says, Dvarav, his words, Chukav, his statutes, Mishpatav, his laws. Why are they referred to as his laws, his statutes? So the Medrash says that whatever Hashem tells us to do, he does himself. So Hashem, obviously metaphorically relative to what these mitzvahs mean to us in terms of physical actions, but Hashem tells us to put on tefillin. That means that Hashem himself puts on tefillin or does some sort of metaphorical, non-physical equivalent of tefillin. And because he does it, Magid Dvarav LeYaakov, so he tells his statute, this thing that he observes, he tells us to do the same thing. And this is true of all the mitzvahs. And this is why it says Magid Dvarav, his words, his statutes and his laws, because he's telling his statutes to us, he's telling us to do the things that he himself observes. So, when it comes to this mitzvah in Kesef Talveh, the question is, Hashem is telling us that there's a mitzvah, an obligation to lend money to someone who is needy in the event that we're in a position to lend them the money they're requesting. So if Hashem's telling us that we have to do that, that means that Hashem does it himself. Because Magid Dvarav LeYaakov Chukav Mishpatav, he tells us to do the things that he does, which means that Hashem himself loans money, metaphorically, to the needy. So the question is, what does this mean? What is this metaphorical lending of money? So, to understand clearly what this means, what is it right? And obviously the impoverished relative to Hashem is us. So if we want to understand what does it mean that Hashem is saying that He Himself observes this obligation to loan us that which we need, it would be nice to understand what's this talking about. What is this loan that we get from Hashem? But to understand this accurately, we need to really zoom in onto this idea of talveh, which is a verb which means you will lend, probably. I don't know if this distinction is correct. A loan usually is used as a noun, but if it's correct, and I think it might be that you could say to loan something to someone as a verb. So what's the difference between loaning and lending? And again, I'm not sure. In Hebrew, there's a very strong distinction. There is to loive and shoyel are both terms for borrowing. Shoyel, when someone is, or here it would say, im something tashil, if you will lend. The word shoyel or tashil, to borrow, to lend, is used to refer to an item, an object, a thing. Anything basically other than cash. A milveh, talveh, refers to lending money. And there's a very, very significant distinction between them halachically and practically. Right? If someone says, can I borrow your car? And you lend them the car, what do you expect? What do you have in mind that you're giving them permission to do when you lend them the car? Generally, to use a car for that which is usually used for, to drive, to transport themselves, people, things, get somewhere, whatever it is, and then to give you back the car. The person, if someone comes back at the end of the day and says, you know what, wow, your car's amazing. I just fell in love with your car. I looked up the market value online. It's worth 25 grand, so here's 25 grand. Here's $25,000 for the car. I'm going to keep the car. You know what that's called? Stealing. Right? They didn't give you the car for keeps. They gave you the car to use and return. And if you go and maybe someone borrowed a car and they have an accident and the car gets totaled, and they don't want to have to tell the person they totaled the car, so they quickly go and buy another car and a replacement, and it looks almost exactly the same, and hopefully the person's not going to tell them. They replace the number plates, the license plates and whatever it is, and they bring the car back, and then the person notices, hang on a second, like there's a dent missing or a scratch or something, like what's going on? This is not my car. Or maybe they notice, the engine's in a bit of different condition when they start driving, whatever it is. And the person says, oh, but it's the same car, it doesn't matter. I was like, what do you mean it doesn't matter? I lent you a car, I want my car back, this is not my car. Now, assuming someone totaled the car, I guess that's a nice thing to do, is to replace the car. But you didn't have permission to do that, right? When someone lends you an object, you have permission to use the object for the thing that it is generally used for, and then return the object. If someone, if you come up to someone and you say, oh, I need to get something, can you spot me $20? Can you, lend me $20? I'll pay you back tomorrow or the end of the week or whatever it is. And you give them a $20 bill. When they come back next week and they give you $20, you don't look at the serial number and say, hang on a second, this isn't a $20 bill I lent you. You don't care. You didn't lend them a $20 bill so that they could look at it. You lent them a $20 bill so that they could be able to spend the money with the understanding that they're going to return an equal amount of cash to you when the time of the loan is over. They're allowed to use it, they're allowed to spend it, and generally speaking, if they give you back a $20 bill or two tens or a 10 and two fives, unless you have a specific reason why you wanted a $20 bill, it doesn't make a difference. You don't care. It's irrelevant. There's no attachment to that $20 bill. You don't want that $20 bill back. If someone, let's say the person says, you know what, can you lend me $20? I'll pay you back next week. And the person, calls you in the evening and says, remember I asked you for $20, I needed it for this thing, but I only spent $10.50 on that and I have some change and I wanted to get something else. Is it okay if I use the change? What are you going to respond? You're going to be like, I lent you $20, I don't care. Give me back my $20 next week when you said you were going to give it back. You don't have to ask me for permission to spend it. That's how a loan of money works. I give you the money, you spend the money, you give me back an equal amount of money, equal value. I don't care if it's the same bill, I don't care if it's the same denominations, I don't care what you spend it on. Now, granted, a person might have moral objections and say, I'm not going to lend you money for, this thing that I'm morally opposed to or this thing that I think is bad for you. So that might happen. But that's a specific scenario. But generally speaking, when money is lent with the understanding that the person can spend it however they want, use it, as long as they return equal value of money. As opposed to when you lend an object, the person doesn't have the right to just replace the market value of the object. They have to give you back the object that you lent them in the same condition in which you lent it to them, minus, and this incidentally halachically happens to be very important, minus whatever wear and tear maybe is reasonable. Right? If someone says, can I borrow your car for a month? I'm going to be doing a cross-country trip. And then you get the car back and you look at it and you're like, oh my goodness, there's 10,000 miles on my car in a month. You put 10,000 miles on, the market value's gone down. You owe me this amount of money, or this is not a valid loan. It's like, well, no, you lent them the car. You knew they were going to use it for a cross-country road trip. It was understood they were going to put a lot of miles on. Or if it's like, well, now I have to do an oil change earlier, so now you have to pay me for the oil change. It's like, no. If you lent them the car with the understanding that this was going to be the use, whatever wear and tear reasonably comes along with that is baked into the cake. That's understood. You lent them the car. You knew they were doing this trip. You knew they were going to put, a good amount of miles on. You knew there was going to be some wear and tear. You knew there was going to need to be an oil change. They didn't do anything wrong. If they crashed the car or they did something that wasn't reasonable expected wear and tear, that's unexpected. That's called damage. That's not called reasonable wear and tear, and that's a different story. Right? If you start doing donuts at every intersection and you burn through brand new tires when that wasn't necessary for the amount of miles you did, maybe you should replace the tires because that wasn't expected reasonable wear and tear. But aside from expected reasonable wear and tear, you have to return the object in the same condition. Right? Now it doesn't say in whatever something, it doesn't work for kesef because kesef is a milva by definition. But maybe someone will say, can I borrow that $100 bill? Or that $100 bill's so crisp, it's fresh from the mint. I love the way it looks. I've been wanting to get a photo of a crisp $100 bill from the mint. Or someone says, can I borrow that $100? And you say, I've only got this really crisp bill from the mint. I really want this bill. I don't want to, I want to keep it. Person says, that's fine, I just want to get a photo, or example off the top of my head of a crisp bill straight from the mint. Can I take a photo and give it back to you? Then that would be she'ela. You're being mash'il. You're lending them the $100 bill, not as cash, but as an object. So in that case, it might say, im kesef tash'il. If you will loan this cash to them. But it doesn't say that. It says im kesef talve. If you will lend it as money, which means that you can use it for whatever you want. And it's two kind of opposite things here. Well, not opposites, but distinctly separate things that are important. One is you can do whatever you want with this cash for the week until the terms of the loan are up. I don't have the right to ask you what you're doing with it unless I stipulate it at the beginning. But if you just say, can I borrow $100 cash till next week? I say, yes, here's the money. I don't get to call you up the next day and say, hang on a second, did you do this and this with the money? Well, too bad. You lent money. Money's, and in halacha, the words that we use are milva lahotza'ah nitna. A cash loan is given lahotza'ah, to spend. You don't expect that same piece of paper back. You don't expect that same coin back. You just expect the value, the cash value, to be returned. So on one hand, you can do whatever you want with it. It's kind of like for keeps. You own it, but you only own it for that period of time, and you do have to pay it back when the time of the loan is up. Otherwise, again, that's called stealing. So, clearly, in our relationship with Hashem, there is something that Hashem is giving to us to use as we will, on our own terms. We have the freedom to use it in whatever way we choose to use it. But there is an expectation of return that Hashem has. Now, obviously, one layer of this expectation of return is Hashem lends us a body and Hashem lends us a soul. And, at the end of a person's life, the body and the soul get returned to Hashem. But that's not really the person returning them. That's Hashem collecting them. So if there is some sort of way in which we have this loan, Hashem is loaning something to us, and we have an obligation to return it in a timely manner. We have an obligation to return it in a satisfactory manner. And it has to be of equal or proportionate value. Hashem gives every single one of us gifts. Hashem gives every single one of us every single one of us has talents. Every single one of us has unique circumstances. Every single one of us has a whole range of things that come together to make us who we are. Those things are a loan, equivalent of a cash loan. Because if Hashem says you are obligated to lend money to those who need it if they ask, if you can, that means Hashem lends that to us when we need it. And it's a milveh. It has the halachic parameters of a cash loan. Which means Hashem gives us these talents, and then Hashem gives us the freedom to choose to use them as we please. We have obligations, but our hands are not tied. Right? And this is a distinction when we talk about free will. Sometimes people are like, well, what do you mean Hashem gives us free will? It's like, no, he doesn't. Have you looked in Shulchan Aruch lately? Have you looked in Code of Jewish Law in the Torah? You call that free will? It's like, well, those are obligations, but Hashem doesn't put a leash on you. Hashem tells you what your obligations are, and then it's up to you to decide whether or not you're going to observe them. We have the freedom of choice to choose whether or not we do them. It doesn't mean that we have no responsibilities, no obligations. And it's the same thing here. Hashem gives us gifts. Hashem gives us talents. Hashem gives us opportunities. Hashem gives us unique circumstances. And we have the ability, the option to do whatever we want with them. Same as borrowed cash. But also like borrowed cash, there is a requirement, there is an expectation that the equal value will be returned, will be repaid when the terms of that loan are up. Now in this case, Hashem, the equal value that Hashem wants returned is not just going to be for us to return those talents to Him, because that's not something we choose to do, right? If the same way when a person borrowed money, they have to return the money to the person who lent it to them. It's an obligation that they have. We don't have an obligation to return our body to Hashem or to return our soul to Hashem, God forbid. That's Hashem's department. Our obligation is to maintain them in our own possession in the most healthy and secure way that we can, and for as long as we possibly can, to keep healthy and safe. So what does it mean that we have an obligation to return this loan to Hashem? And it comes back again, just like when you're returning a cash loan, you don't need to give the same $100 bill back. You don't need to give back the same $20 bill. As long as it's $20 worth of cash, as long as it's $100 worth of cash. As long as you're returning cash that has the same value as the cash that you borrowed, it doesn't have to be the exact same bill or the same coins. Someone gives you a check. Most people are not going to mind if you return cash. So, as long as it's the same value. So we don't need to return the talents themselves to Hashem, but we need to return something of equal value. What is there of equal value to talents, to gifts that we could return to Hashem? When someone lends you cash, what do they have in mind? You're going to give them back cash. So you're going to return the thing that they have in mind that they want back from you. What does Hashem want back from us when He lends us gifts, when He lends us talents, when He lends us circumstances, when He lends us opportunities? What is it that Hashem wants back of equal or proportionate value? Hashem wants us to make use of them, to use them to make a difference in the world. That's the thing Hashem wants back. And if someone has an incredible gift, incredible talent, incredible opportunities, and they do a couple of good things, a couple of nice things, but they don't do anywhere near what they have the ability to do. They're not elevating the world anywhere near as much as they could. They're not illuminating the world. They're not uplifting people. They're not integrating divinity into the world to the extent that they could. That's like the person who borrows a $100 bill and comes back a week later when the time's up and says, "Oh, here you go," and gives back a $5 bill. It's like, person's going to be like, well, where's the rest of the money? And they're like, well, you gave me some money. Here, I'm giving you back some money. It's like, yeah, but I didn't just give you back some money. I didn't just give you some money. I gave you some money in the amount of $100 and you returned me some money in the amount of $5. That's not called repaying a loan. If Hashem gave us gifts, opportunities, circumstances, talents that enable us to have a profound impact on the world, a profound impact on the people around us, to make a big difference. And the difference that we make, what we return to Hashem, is something that is of a smaller value than what He gave to us. We are ripping Hashem off. We are only partially repaying our loan. And the fact is that every single one of us does have gifts, talents, opportunities, circumstances that enable us to make a massive impact in the world. Every one of us does. And I would say I can't say that it says these exact words anywhere that I've seen in a book, but based on all the things that are in all the books that I've seen, as well as, all the other things that come along with that, I am very confident in saying that every one of us has a very real ability to make a far larger impact than we think is realistically possible. If we would really buy in and commit and dedicate ourselves, and it doesn't have to be to an extent that in a way that's just over the top and we wear ourselves out and burn ourselves out, because that's not the plan. But if we would really buy in and commit and sort of almost surrender and go all the way in a way that's healthy and all of those things, I think that all of us could make an impact in the world and achieve things that are far beyond what most of us think is like really realistic for your regular person, for us, for ourselves. Every one of us can make a massive impact. And the reason that we're in a position to make a huge impact, and everyone's impact is different, right? Every one of us has a different, and this is true not just of every one of us in the room, this is true of every one of us collectively, every one of what are we up to, 8 billion people on the planet? Every single one of the 8 billion people on the planet has, first of all, down at the level of our genes, has a unique set of genes that don't match anybody else's genes. Has a unique set of 10 fingerprints. That means that right now, there are 80 billion different unique fingerprints in the world. Right? And the same way that our genes are unique and our fingerprints are unique, our minds are unique. And our emotional makeup is unique, every one of us. And then you combine our mind and our emotional makeup, and then that becomes even more unique, because you have unique multiplied by unique. And every one of us has circumstances that are somewhat unique. Right? Even identical twins raised in the same home have variation in their circumstances to some degree. One was walking down the street and got a positive comment, and the other one was walking down the street and got a negative comment. Those things make a difference. They are, they enter into the person's experience. They become a part of what informs that person and their perspective and their experience and their emotional makeup and all of these things. And you now have two different people who have the same genes in the same home and the same class and the same friends and everything else, but there's no such thing as two people are unique. And that's even 100% identical twins, hypothetically raised in the same home, the same class, let alone people who do not have that degree of similarity. Every single one of us is unique. And there's a specific impact on the world that every single one of us is designed to make. If there wasn't an impact that Hashem needs to have made in the world, that you can make, that everyone else combined wasn't able to make, if that were not the case, does Hashem need an 8 billion and first person? Hashem's got 8 billion people. Or let's do it the other way. Hashem's got 7,999,999,999. Did I get that right? Close enough. Whatever. People without me. If all of them could do everything that Hashem needed, it's like, well, I've already got 79.9999999 billion fingerprints, and now 10 more fingerprints I have to come up with, another whole new set of genes, another whole mind, and another whole unique personality. It's like, seriously? For what? Now, obviously, it doesn't quite work that way with Hashem in a literal sense. But if Hashem decided, you know what, 7.99999 billion people and 79.99999 billion fingerprints is not enough, I need another person. Why? Obviously, those 7.99999 billion people couldn't get the job done, and there was something that required that 8 billionth person, and that 8 billionth person is every single one of us. Which means that there's something that Hashem needs, there's something that the universe needs, there's something that the Jewish people need, there's something that is needed in order to fulfill the purpose of existence and of creation and to bring Mashiach, that is needed from every single one of us that's unique, that everyone else combined could not provide. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Every one of us has a loan that Hashem lent us, has our talents, our circumstances, our opportunities, our experiences, all the things that come together to make us into the individual that we are effectively. Every single one of us has that Hashem gave us. Hashem didn't technically have to. I mean, according to this pasuk, Hashem was obligated to. It's a loan. But it's a cash loan, which means you can do what you want with it, and there are lots of creative ways that we can use our gifts and our talents. Right? You can have any given one of us can look at our talents, look at our circumstances, and I have data to say this, I didn't see it in a book, but I'm pretty confident that every one of us could come up with more than one way in which we could use our unique gifts, talents, circumstances, etc. to make a positive impact, to do something meaningful. Now, sometimes a person will look at that and say, yes, but there's definitely one that that really makes sense, that's the one that Hashem has in mind for me based on my circumstances, my talents. That can be a thing sometimes. Right? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are a few different pathways, and it's like, you know what? Maybe they're all equally good for some of us, and just pick one and do it. But the bottom line is we have options, we have choices. But the thing that's not optional, and not optional doesn't mean that there's a leash around our neck. It means that we have an obligation, and that is to return the full value of the loan. Every single one of us has gifts that put us in a position to make a massive, profound, powerful impact on the world, on the people around us, on the universe, on Hashem, on Torah and mitzvahs, on the Jewish people. And if we are shortchanging Hashem, if we are not doing everything we can to make that impact, to elevate the people around us, to integrate divinity into the world, to make the world a better place, through Torah and mitzvahs, we're shortchanging Hashem. We are maybe repaying the loan, but not repaying the full amount that we borrowed. Now, that's true, and that I would say is perhaps the foundation. But, it's so, the fact that the Rebbe brings this in here as the next stage of this conversation is amazing to me.
But aren't we all here because someone else shortchanged Hashem? Because I'm not a new neshama. I'm not that high of a level.
First of all, who says?
Okay, fine.
Do you have the paperwork to prove that?
Okay, no. But I'm just saying, having a new neshama.
Okay, let's say, assuming that what you're saying is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we be back to go like your reincarnation because someone shortchanged Hashem.
So what's the question?
Then like, if we all don't shortchange Hashem, then like we're just done.
Yeah.
Maybe if we all don't shortchange Hashem, Mashiach will be here and there won't need to be any reincarnation.
All right, I'll get it together.
That's first of all.
Okay.
Second of all, I mean, if that's the question, that's the answer.
Okay, great.
If we zoom out a little, and there are sort of a few different ways that question could go, it's like maybe every one of us here hypothetically is here because someone else shortchanged Hashem. That's them. That's got nothing to do with us.
Okay.
You know, and it certainly cannot be our obligation to shortchange Hashem in order to ensure the continuation of people to continue shortchanging Hashem. Like that math doesn't add up.
The math isn't mathing.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't add up.
Break the cycle,
Yeah, there you go. Now,
Okay.
there are some halachas that, when it comes to having lent someone money, for example, that can be very, very jarring to people when they learn them for the first time. So the pasuk talks about lending money. It says, "Lo alav kanosha." You are not allowed to be this oppressive, creditor, debtor, I don't know, person that they owe money to. You are not allowed to give someone a hard time if they borrowed money and they don't have money to pay back. If someone's a scam artist, it's a different situation. You take them to Beis Din and you straighten down. But if someone borrowed money and they're like struggling and they don't have the money to pay it back, halachically, actually, if you're walking down the street and you see that person coming, halacha tells you cross the street, because if they pass you on the street, even if you don't say anything, even if you smile and you give them a genuine warm smile and you look into their eyes and you say good morning, do you think they're not going to feel guilty? Do you think they're not going to feel as they walk past, knowing that they borrowed money and they were supposed to pay it back and they haven't paid it back? Of course they will. Now, again, assuming that it's someone who wants to and is trying to and they're struggling, do you think that that negative emotion piled on top of everything else that they're dealing with is going to make them feel more liberated and motivated and driven to go and find the ways to make more money than they've been able to make so far, despite how hard they've been working and struggling? Or do you think it's more likely to just pile on and make the mess even messier and increase the stress and increase the pressure and the tension and the negativity, and if anything, realistically more likely to or reduce the odds that they're going to, succeed at making things better for themselves? That's the reality. That's fact. For the vast majority of people, at least. Or for enough people, at least, let's say at a minimum, that halacha says this is the appropriate behavior. And again, it's Magid Dvarov LeYaakov. This is Hashem's mitzvah, which means that Hashem has the same behavior. Every one of us, and when it comes to these two sides, when it comes to looking at them about ourselves, it is a delicate balance. It is. Because, and this is, when it, going slightly off script a little, but when it comes to, for example, therapy, people who are in therapy, seeing a therapist to deal with some things, a really, really good therapist is worth their weight in gold. But if we just talking generally, therapists in general, therapists are a dime a dozen, like everything else. And there are plenty of therapists who will understand, I have to validate and I have to make people feel understood and heard and seen, without understanding that that's just a part of a picture to actually helping someone make their life better. And so someone comes and they help them feel understood and heard and seen and talk about the issues and talk about the issues and talk about the issues, and never get to actually helping the person try to figure out how to make their life better. And what they end up doing is just getting the person digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper under themselves, and getting the person to wallow and feel like, yes, woe is me, and I'm justified in not doing anything and not making any effort because things are so difficult for me. And if a person adopts that perspective, guaranteed their quality of life is going to continue to go down, 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 down. Not because validating and hearing and all of those things is not important. It is important, first of all, because it's true. And second of all, because that builds a foundation for someone to be able to work. When a person feels unheard, misunderstood, unseen, it's very difficult for them to have the motivation and the power to move forward. And when a person feels, you know what, like, it's not just me. I'm not in this alone. Like, this is a real thing. It's valid. It's real. There are people who understand. Like, it's a real thing, and they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel understood. And then they feel motivated and driven and feel like, hey, yes, this is real. This is valid. It's not just me. I didn't make it up. This is real. There are people who hear me and see me and understand. And then those people also give the support and the direction, or the lead them in, along to figure out how they can actually make things better for themselves. Now that they feel seen and heard and understood, that puts them in a position to be able to put in the effort to go and make things better for themselves. And on one hand, if someone's having these issues and they go to talk to someone, whether it's a professional person with a label therapist or a good friend or a mentor or a teacher or a rabbi or whatever it is, when someone's having a hard time and they go and talk to someone and the person's just like, you serious? Just like, get it together. Come on. Like, what's the chance that that's going to help? Literally 0.00% chance. Assuming that the person actually is having a hard time with things that they've tried to figure out and not succeeded. Sometimes some people just need a kick in the pants. That's true, for sure. But if someone really needs help and a person makes them feel unheard, unseen, not understood, they're not going to even be in a position to believe or to feel like there's anything to do or there's any hope of moving forward, and they're not going to be able to have the motivation to move forward. So yes, that being understood and heard is very, very important. It's imperative. But just on its own, it can be extremely destructive and make things worse if it's not paired with, yes, this is true, yes, this is real. Like, these things are real, and there's a lot of other people who have similar things. Not that it makes you the same as them, but like, yeah, this is a real thing. And it's not your fault, and you deserve better. And if you want to make things better, here's how we can go about doing it. And if, on one hand, if a person says, yes, I hear you, I understand, yes, 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 and that's the end of it, that can be very destructive. Someone else saying, well, here's what you can do to make your life better without first making them feel understood and heard, can also be destructive. Either one without the other is missing a very important part of the picture. Which one's more destructive? I don't know. Probably both in their own way. When you have the two combined, paired, a healthy combination of the two, that's where the magic happens. And exactly how much of each and how to balance them and when and where to transition and all of those things, that's where it becomes perhaps more of an art than a science, and experience and wisdom and all of those things, fine, whatever. But the point is, they're both invaluable, they're both necessary, but each one needs the other one in order for it to be valuable. Insight about how to move forward, for many people, is going to be worth nothing if you haven't made them feel understood first. Making someone feel understood and heard and seen without offering them insight about how to move forward, if they don't have that insight themselves, is not helping them either. Right? And so there has to be that balance. Now, when a person's doing that, about themselves, a person's like, and it's the same is true on ourselves. We have to sometimes cut ourselves some slack and, give ourselves some, have compassion on ourselves, etc. And for some people, this is more, they need more of this more frequently than others. There's a very wide range of personality types. But this is a real thing. The risk is that when it comes to doing that for ourselves, we're really good at fooling ourselves and letting ourselves off the hook. All of us are very good at fooling ourselves, right? In different ways. Some of us fool ourselves in different directions naturally, but we're all very good at fooling ourselves. That being said, the fact that we are good at fooling ourselves doesn't mean that these two things aren't both true at the same time. It just means that we have to be careful and maybe look for some guidance, look for some insight, look for some, someone else who can help keep us on track. But when it comes to repaying that loan to Hashem, Hashem gave us gifts, Hashem gave us abilities, and I think the reality is that every single one of us, if we are going to be real and brutally honest and look in the mirror or get a pen and paper and say, here are my gifts, here are the talents, here are my circumstances, here are my opportunities, all the things that Hashem has given me, and here's what I've repaid Hashem in return. How many of us are going to be able to say, yep, I think I've pretty much repaid in full for what's, deserved up until this point? Probably approximately zero. Now, that's not a judgment. I'm not saying that to be critical. I'm saying that because there's a pasuk, right? The pasuk says, "Ein adam tzadik ba'aretz asher yasa tov le'ech," or something along those lines. Might have not been perfect, the wording, but there is no one who's perfect who has no shortcoming, no deficit. We're all imperfect, right? And chances are, for most of us, we're not just like a tiny little bit imperfect, right? We all could be doing better. Now, on one hand, Hashem gives us that loan and we're obligated to return it. At the same time, it's important to understand, a person can say, "Oh, I haven't returned everything to Hashem. I'm a bad person. Hashem's angry at me. I'm ashamed in front of Hashem. I'm ashamed, and Hashem is everywhere, so I'm just going to bury myself in shame and terrible, and there's no hope." And how helpful is that going to be? If someone already got into that position, chances are that sort of perspective is not going to be helpful to them. It's also not accurate because the mitzvah says, "Lo yisiyeh lov kanosha," and Hashem is the same. And if Hashem sees us metaphorically walking across the street, approaching Him, and Hashem knows that if we walk past Him, we're going to feel that shame, we're going to feel that guilt, and it's going to just pile on more negative emotion on top of everything that we're already dealing with, Hashem will cross the street to make sure we don't feel that. It doesn't mean we're not obligated to return the loan. We are. But at the same time as it's important to remember we are obligated to repay this loan to Hashem, it's also important to remember, and it's important first of all because it's the truth. It's also important, again, this is very much for some people more than others. There are some people who have a personality type and a drive and things that they don't necessarily need so much of this. And then there's, another huge category of people that are very sensitive to this. The fact is, maybe we haven't repaid the loan to Hashem. Hashem is not standing there saying, "Come on, repay the loan. Hello, what's going on? Time's up." How do we know that? Because Hashem says that if we lend money to someone, we're not allowed to do that. And it's to the opposite extreme. We have to take a detour and cross the street to make sure that they're not going to feel ashamed when they pass us on the sidewalk. Which means that Hashem is doing the same thing. Yes, we have an obligation to repay the loan, but Hashem is not glaring at us. Hashem is not scowling at us. Hashem is, for whatever this means, kaviyachol, metaphorically, going out of His way to make sure that we don't feel any more negativity than necessary. And for people who are prone to feeling that and feeling like, getting caught up in that negative emotion and feeling like, "Oh my goodness, I let Hashem down. I'm not living up to Hashem's expectations. I'm not fulfilling the loan that Hashem gave to me." And if that's just going to bring us down more, then we have to stop and say to ourselves, well, Hashem's not thinking that. Hashem's not busy thinking that we haven't repaid the loan. Hashem is trying to empower us to feel as positive as possible to the extent that He will, kaviyachol, metaphorically cross the street to make sure that we don't feel that shame. Because shame doesn't help. It's not constructive. Now, again, exactly how we define shame in the circumstances, shame has a role. Hashem created shame for a reason. But the kind of shame that, that it's probably part of it is the kind of shame and part of it is the personality type. If the shame is bringing us down, sometimes some kinds of shame for some people can be motivating and driving and push them forward. And then that's okay. That kind of shame for that kind of person in that circumstance is fine because it's constructive. That's the bottom line. What's the outcome? But if the outcome is negative, it's bringing us down, it's making things harder, then Hashem's not thinking about it. Hashem's not viewing us that way. Hashem's going out of His way to avoid that, to minimize that. And then we have to remind ourselves, you know what? Yeah, it's okay. Like, Hashem gets it. Hashem understands. Because as much as Hashem gives us gifts and talents and expects us to repay that loan in full, Hashem also has an equally insightful and accurate understanding as the creator of all of these things of what the challenge can be like, of the human condition. Hashem created each of us. Hashem created each of our personalities and our internal circumstances also. And the things within our personalities and our experiences that make things more complicated for us than for others maybe, or more challenging or more difficult, and we each have our own versions of this. And Hashem gets it. And so Hashem, while we have a halachic obligation to repay that loan, Hashem is not scowling at us if we've fallen short so far. Hashem's rooting for us. And Hashem is crossing the street in the event that that's necessary to make sure that we don't have to feel ashamed, to make sure that we don't feel more negative than we already do. Which means that Hashem doesn't want us feeling negative. If Hashem wanted us to feel negative, He would make us feel negative. He'd walk straight past and look us in the eyes and say, come on, what's going on? Yeah, you're overdue. Hashem doesn't do that. Hashem does the opposite. And Hashem tells us that we also have to do the opposite because He does the opposite. Hashem wants to minimize the negativity. Hashem wants us to have as much belief in ourselves and motivation and strength and positivity to be able to move forward and to take those actions necessary so we can repay the loan. And to the extent that that shame starts creeping in, it's our job to say, no, Hashem doesn't want me feeling that. Hashem literally would have crossed the street just to make sure that I shouldn't feel this. Now, you know what? Yeah, part of the human condition sometimes is that shame creeps in. But at least we should know that it's not righteous. If it's going to bring us down, it's not righteous, it's not correct, it's not what Hashem wants, and Hashem does go out of His way to avoid adding to that, and we should do the same thing, because that's the correct approach.
Are your gifts meant to be your main focus, in your lifestyle? For example, maybe you have a career, but that career is not involved with your gifts. Maybe it's just your career, that's what you do. You live in a world, you find a good job, and you do your shlichus wherever you go, and maybe your talent is a hobby, or should it be that your talents are your main career?
It's a good question. I don't think there's a black and white yes or no answer to that. I think it's very complex because, for some people, and people use the word gift as a synonym for talents. And if you notice, I didn't do it all the times, but I know that some of the times I mentioned it today, I said your gifts, your talents, your circumstances, all of those things, because those are all part of your gifts. Your talents are part of your gifts. Your circumstances are also part of your gifts. Your opportunities are also part of your gifts, right? Your experiences are also part of your gifts. So maybe for one person, they're using their unique talent in a specific thing in a hobby because they got a really unique opportunity in terms of their career or their primary thing, that maybe it doesn't align perfectly with their talents, but it was a very unique opportunity. And it's it might be sometimes a person might say, I have a hard time, trying to claim that Hashem didn't give me this opportunity for a very specific reason, this shouldn't have happened and no one else gets this opportunity. So maybe the opportunity is the gift in that case. Right? Maybe the circumstances are the main gift, the thing that Hashem wants us to focus on. It doesn't mean don't use your talents, but yes, for some people, the primary emphasis and focus of their time and efforts should be on the thing that they're talented in and passionate about, if those two align, which makes a person very fortunate. For some people, the thing that they should be focusing in is the opportunity. And you know what, for some people, and it's not just one or two, a lot of people, they don't necessarily see I have this specific, unique talent that makes me super unique and clear that I should focus on this. And maybe they didn't get any specific, unique opportunity or anything. And this person's going through life and every day putting in effort to do the best they can and looking at the opportunities they have and trying to figure out what's the right thing. And for some people, those are their gifts. That is the opportunity to make the most of who they are and to express themselves, their soul, their body, and to make the maximum contribution in the world and realize the purpose of creation to the maximum degree. And that is their gift. Their gift is this very vanilla set of circumstances and talents. And because Hashem needs that too. Hashem doesn't just need the exciting, shiny things. Hashem needs a lot of vanilla. And, so there are a lot of people who don't necessarily look and say, oh yes, I have this talent, that's my thing, or I got this special opportunity, that's my thing. For a lot of people, their gift is their life and their talents and opportunities, and it might all just come together in a way that's not super shiny. And that's the truth that's the reality for a lot of people. It doesn't make it any less of a gift, and it doesn't make it any less valuable, and it clearly doesn't make it any less important because they're here. So, it really depends. And I don't even know if there's anyone aside from an actual Rebbe who could look at someone and say, okay, yeah, okay, so in your circumstance, this is the answer. Sometimes even the wisest person will say, you know what? I don't know, what do you think? Or there are really a couple options here that look really good. Do you feel better about one or the other? Maybe we should try one and see how it goes. It's not if you're smart enough, then you'll for sure know the answer every time. It's more complicated than that sometimes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.